Dobro večer, poštovani gledaoci. Prvi put nakon rata Međunarodna komisija istraživala je događaje u Srebrenici da bi se na osnovu naučnih dokaza dobila šira slika o dešavanjima u Srednjem Podrinju, odnosno Srebreničkoj regiji. Skoro 2 godine 10 stručnjaka iz različitih oblasti istraživalo je događaje u periodu od 1992. do 1995. godine. Na preko 1000 stranica izvještaja prvi put se govori i o srpskim žrtvama, nikada sprovedenoj demilitarizaciji ove regije, ali i o uzroku smrti bošnjačkih žrtava. Sa nama je večeras Stiven Mejer iz Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, član nezavisne Međunarodne komisije za istraživanje stradanja svih naroda u Srebreničkoj regiji od 1992. do 1995. godine. Mr. Mejer, good evening.
Good evening.
You work with your colleagues for almost 2 years before publishing the conclusions and presenting the report on the events in the Srebrenica region. 2 days after the report was published in BIH, High Representative Valentin Inzko imposed the law on the period of war and the qualification of crimes. How do you look at it?
Well, first of all, the Commission believes that Inzko instituted that law partly in response to the Commission's work. Secondly, it is very difficult for me to understand, or for any of the Commission members to understand, why anyone, Serb, Croat, Bosniak, would take this law seriously. It is a step backwards in the development of democratic Europe. It's an imposition from another era. It is as if the Balkan region had not progressed beyond occupations by Ottomans and Austrians and Russians into a modern era. There is no other country that I'm aware of in the democratic world that would tolerate the imposition of this kind of law. I know in the United States, it would be rejected immediately, and it would also be not only by the Congress, but by the courts. I think it is a very unfortunate development. The third thing I would say about it is, you know, Inzko did this and then quickly left the country and left his responsibilities. And he left a mess when he went back to Austria for others to clean up behind him. The fourth point I would make is that if you read the statute, the UN statute that he relied on, it does not give Inzko the right to impose laws on Bosnia. So I think that the best thing that the prosecutors here in Bosnia can do is to ignore this. As the RTRS has done. It's a step backwards, and I'm glad that the Republika Srpska recognizes that. I would also say that as an American citizen, I'm embarrassed that my embassy here, along with the British embassy, endorsed this Inzko law. This is really an intervention in the internal affairs of Bosnia and really has no role for the proper diplomatic relationship that Bosnia should have with the United States.
Are you afraid of criminal charges? After the presentation of the report in Belgrade, you said that you would visit Republika Srpska. You are here now. Do you feel safe?
Oh, I feel safe here, yes. I don't think I would feel quite as safe in the Federation, but I do feel safe here. In the first place, the Commission has never denied genocide. We fully accept the fact that genocide has existed. It's a horrible thing. Legally, morally, genocide is awful. What we really said was that what happened in Srebrenica does not meet the definition that the United Nations has put forward in the Genocide Convention. And that certainly what happened in Srebrenica constitutes war crimes and constitutes crimes against humanity. But again, by the definition that the UN has established, it did not meet the requirement for genocide. That's all we really said. There was no denial of genocide. We relied on the definition that the UN put forward in the Genocide Convention.
Is the imposition of the law a sign that dialogue in BIH is impossible? You also talked about the interference of foreign embassies in BIH in the political processes in BIH.
Well, there's nothing new about the intervention of outside of foreign embassies in the domestic affairs of BIH. And you know, to be quite frank, the American embassy has had a major role in that. The British embassy, the German embassy, they have all had a special interest in becoming involved in the internal politics of not just the BIH, but the whole region. And really, it's again, I go back to this point, it's a throwback to the 19th century, that these embassies cannot recognize the democratic development and the development of the democratic development of the region and the right to self-determination. It's a very sad and unfortunate development.
Let us return to the report and conclusions. You have established that among the Bosniaks killed are a large number of those who died during the retreat towards Tuzla in mutual conflicts. Also, there were crimes which no one disputes, and that is about prisoners of war.
Yeah.
But for the first time, the suffering of Serbs in Srebrenica region is also being talked about at the international level. Why is it important to have all the facts in one place from the beginning to the end of the war?
Well, I think, first of all, what the Commission did was look at the suffering of all people in the region. That was something that we insisted on doing, that it wasn't just Serbs we were looking at. But what this does, I think, looking at this from beginning to end and in depth, what it means is it's a coming to terms with history. It's coming to terms with the past. It's saying that at least for the Serbs, for the Republika Srpska, they can now look at what happened there. They can take responsibility. We were very honest about some of the crimes that Serbs perpetrated on Muslim population, and some of the killings. The government of the RS has not pressured us in any way. It has not tried to change our views. We made it very clear to the government that when they asked us to do this, we would be totally independent. We would not change anything, and if there was any pressure, we would all walk away from the project. That never happened. And even with some of the very difficult results that we published in that report, and the report is available to anyone who wants to read it, some of the very difficult parts of that report have been accepted. So it's a period of time where there can be some healing, there can be some dealing with what happened, and saying, yes, we were involved, as others were. We were involved in things that should not have happened, in war crimes, in crimes against humanity. But now we can move forward, having admitted that and having recognized that. We can deal with the past, and we can move on as a democratic society.
I'm reading here a partial check of the lists established that those who died or died before 95 were buried in the Srebrenica Memorial Center, and those who have personal documents are also on the list. For some reason, manipulation is happening. Who doesn't want to determine the exact number of victims?
Well, I think there's a great deal of myth that has grown up around this. The number of 8,000 has now become part of the myth, part of the common wisdom. And if you talk to people, including I talk to people in the United States, they say, well, where do you get that number from? They don't have a very good answer to it. So there is a constituency that does not like to investigate what really happened all the way from the beginning to the end. They are much more concerned with and much more interested in preserving the myth, preserving the hostility, not moving forward. We looked very hard at from every aspect of that we could possibly do forensically, scientifically, with respect to the number that were dead, and we went where the facts took us.
How many Bosniaks were killed in the armed conflict?
Well, let me first say that before I mention the armed conflict, we looked at 5 main grave sites. And what we had to do, I mean, there's no way to go into those graves and count every body at this point in time. So what we did was we looked at those grave sites and we estimated the maximum number of people who could be buried in those sites. And we came up with about 3,700. Of those people were shot and killed and buried. They were executed. In terms of combat, especially when the 28th Division broke out of Srebrenica and made a dash for Tuzla area, we estimate that about 5,000 of the Muslim forces died in that breakout, mostly through ambushes by Serb forces.
When you talk about 3,700, you are talking about prisoners of war?
Yes, prisoners of war who were executed, who were shot, yes.
Okay. Several thousand Serbs were killed in Srebrenica region, but unlike Serbs, Bosniaks were not held accountable for these crimes. Can we blame foreign media for the situation, which in the 90s presented Serbs as bad guys while presenting members of the so-called army of RBIH as the only legitimate military force?
Now we do know, and we did examine this with the Commission, that there was in the months and even years before July of 1995, there were attacks on many Serb villages in the area, and many Serbs were killed. Many of these were under the command of Nasser Arch. There was a general perception in the West, in the media, and I must say including the American media, that the combat was Serb-inspired, that the Serbs were indeed at fault. Now, that doesn't mean the Serbs don't bear responsibility, but others do too. Yes, it was very difficult through much of the war, not just Srebrenica, but much of the war, to establish facts, to say, yes, the Serbs did things that were terrible, but so did the Muslims, so did the Croats, do things that were terrible. So in answer to your basic question, yeah, there is some culpability with the Western media, yeah.
And the last question, as a former CIA operative for the Balkans, I must ask you about the future of BIH. Should we turn to dialogue and solution in the future, or as before, wish that someone else solve our problems? Is the solution way out? Yeah. We can hear it very often.
Yeah, to reflect on that a bit, I've been thinking about that a lot, and we talked about that a lot in the Commission. It was not really something that we were formally responsible for answering, but I think I've been coming here for almost 30 years, and I still come back. And I have many friends here, and I enjoy coming here. I have reflected on this a lot and talked about it with colleagues a lot. I have not seen as serious a situation since the war as we have now in this region. Ironically, I think the INSCO law has driven even more serious division between the Federation, between Muslims and Serbs. And I think that it is possible that this law, if it's carried forward, and especially if there are sanctions against Serb leaders from the RS, it could drive the Republika Srpska to independence. I think it is that serious. I have not seen it this serious, this dire, since 1995. So I think that there's really now, it's worse than it's been for a long time, and I think that there's very little possibility for reconciliation as constituent members of a single state. I have said for many years that Bosnia the state is essentially a fiction anyhow. Well, this makes the fiction complete. It makes the crack wider. I think there can be reconciliation to the extent that the RS and the Federation say, let's go each our own way in peace. Let's not have violence, let's not have war. But it is clear we cannot live together in the same state. This was forced on the people in the region. It was forced by the West. The West, especially the US, especially Washington, said, you must be a state. And Washington never really understood the depth of the ethnic situation. It's not something that is common to the American experience, the same way it is here in the Balkans. So we did not have, American authorities, especially in the 1990s, did not have a very good conception of the depth of the ethnic problem and the role that history plays in this part of the world. I mean, you celebrate the 28th of June. That's a huge defeat for the Serb nation. And yet, it's like it was yesterday in the minds of some people. So I am not optimistic that Bosnia will survive this. I think it's much more likely that there will be, and I hope it's done peacefully, that there will be a separation, and that in time there will be cross-border connections, economic, political, but each one going their own way.
That's the only solution of the problem.
I think at this point in time, with everything that's happened, and interestingly with the INSCO law and the way the RS is facing it and the way the Federation is facing it, I don't see any possibility that the country stays together.
Mr. Mejer, thank you for your time.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Poštovani gledaoci, naš gost bio je član nezavisne Međunarodne komisije za istraživanje stradanja svih naroda u Srebreničkoj regiji od 1992. do 1995. godine, Stiven Mejer iz Sjedinjenih Američkih Država. Ostanite uz program Radio-televizije Republike Srpske. Prijatno večer.